Hello and welcome to another edition of VU Sports Wired. I'm your host, Max Schneider, alongside Bobby Kent and Jessie Goldman today, filling in for Justin Hershey. We've got a good show today ahead of you. We'll start with Vanderbilt basketball's crushing loss this past weekend against the Georgia Bulldogs at the buzzer. We'll talk about baseball's 7-game win streak, about to be 8 after today's game ends. Jessie, you were on hand yesterday for that game, of course. We'll break down that game and Jack Leiter before you move into the news of the day. The strategic plan, the long sought-after strategic plan that's been the topic of conversation really since Malcolm Turner took over. Now, of course, Candace Story-Lee in charge. She released that plan with the help of the athletic department today. But we'll start with basketball's game this weekend against Georgia. Guys, you see it here. Scottie Pippen at the line late in this game. 1-point game. He misses the free throw. Ball's loose for a little while. Tyree Crump picks it up and hurls up a prayer at the buzzer to win the game for Georgia. I mean, this entire game, Vanderbilt was in the lead. Looked like Vanderbilt was going to take it, get that second SEC win of the year, build some momentum heading into this backstretch, and then it's all for naught after that last shot. I want to break down these last few minutes, guys. How do you think Vanderbilt kind of blew it in these last few minutes, or did Georgia really just come in and take the game? I
think they blew it. I mean, you can't miss free throws that close down the stretch, and as much as they're young guys and it's all part of the maturity process, they've played in enough games where it's close, and they know the importance of you have to knock down those shots. And also, I mean, I don't really want to get into the ref's call at the end with the foot out of bounds thing, but I mean, you have to close it out. I don't know what else to say. I think Vanderbilt lost this game in the end.
I think Scottie Pippen only had 2 shots at the line. If he hits both of them, we still could be going into overtime. Right? He hits that 3-point shot. We're not looking at a guaranteed win. If you're up 3 and he's got 2 shots to put the game away and he misses them, that's a different story. But we're starting 3 freshmen at a time, playing 3 walk-ons at a time. We've lost our best player, a lottery pick in Aaron Nesmith. And closing games is going to be hard. It's really going to be hard. Georgia's Tom Crean, I mean, he's won national championships. Like, the competition they're playing with these inexperienced players in the SEC, I don't necessarily think they blew it. Is it a game they should have won? Absolutely. And if they played it again, you'd expect them to win it, especially when they're winning the whole time. But this is a building process, and I don't think it's time to hit the panic button.
So, I mean, you mentioned kind of it's going to take time to win some of these close games. Is that just a mark of Vanderbilt really hasn't been in that many close games this year? I mean, recently we've seen this team really pick up the slack. But early in SEC play, it was kind of blowout after blowout after blowout. And it does take time to learn how to win those. Is it just Vanderbilt doesn't have that experience in enough of those close games to be really expected to make those free throws, to not turn the ball over late, to really play above their age level?
Yeah, I think for sure. I also think that this is kind of was an unfortunate game in a way that they did break the trend of playing down to their competition, and then this was a game that they should have won because Georgia is maybe in the same spot and doesn't necessarily know how to finish games as well. But I think it probably is a maturity process as well. And I think over time this team is going to get better as long as this core stays together. But I still think they should have won the game. I don't know what to say.
Obviously, they took Auburn down to the wire in the first game of the year. So you lose your best player, and the team falls apart for a couple games. They can't create offense. They're getting blown out at home and on the road, and it's really messy for a few days. But you're in the first year of a new system with Coach Stackhouse, and you have to completely recreate the offense. Everything has to be redone. Saban Lee goes to the bench. Their guy, Dylan Disu, has much more of an offensive role than just a 3-and-D guy that they thought he might be coming into the season. Jordan Wright is thrown into the lineup and plays really well. And as the season continues, these games start getting a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And then you get one of these games you can win, and then you remember that Georgia has a top 5 overall pick in the draft, which Vanderbilt simply doesn't have, either athletically or skill-wise. I think, A, we haven't been there. B, the team had to climb out of a hole that I think it's actually really impressive that they are competitive in SEC games. And I think it's a really good job by Jerry Stackhouse to reconfigure this offense, and by the team to not, sort of pack in the bag after their 23-point-a-game scorer was out for the year.
Yeah, you mentioned Anthony Edwards in that game. The guy who might be the #1 overall pick this year playing for Georgia. He had a solid game by his standards. Didn't totally dominate. The guy who did dominate that game was Saban Lee, and he dominated it for all 40 minutes. He outplayed Edwards in that game, 34 points. We've seen these kind of performances from Lee lately, now that he's been the guy since Aaron Nesmith's injury. Just how impressive has Lee been over the course of these past few games? And does he have the potential to carry this team over these last few games? Because these are really some winnable games.
No, I think he's played phenomenal. He's gotten to the hoop. He's driven. He's opened up opportunities for other guys to make shots, which sometimes haven't necessarily fallen. But I also feel bad for him in a sense that he's only seen one SEC win over the last 2 years, and when he's really been a mainstay of this offense, and he's averaging almost close to 18 points this year. He had the 34-point outburst, so he has been probably the most consistent player, and I'd almost even say best player. I mean, Nesmith played really well, but most consistent over the last 2 years. I feel for him, but I think he definitely has the tools to carry the team. He's shown it. We got so close to beating Georgia. We got so close. We took Auburn down to the wire. I mean, I believe we're going to get a couple more wins potentially in SEC play with him leading us in the front. Yeah.
I think it's really impressive, especially considering we knew coming into the year he was one of the top 2 players on the offense. For a team that struggles to recruit at a really high level, sometimes you fall behind athletically in the SEC, but he has elite level quickness. We don't have a lot of elite level anything on this team, and he has elite level quickness. We don't have 7'2" guys. Our best shooters gone. Our all SEC defenders aren't there. Like, we don't have them, but he has elite level quickness. And for Stackhouse to ask him to come off the bench for a majority of the season, and then for him to come back into the starting lineup and continue to prove his ability to get to the hoop and create offense, I just think is really impressive.
Yeah, and that's such a big part of it. Is this is a team that often kind of survives on its three-point shot. And sometimes that hasn't fallen this season, and that results in really ugly games because that's what this offense is predicated on. Lee's kind of the only guy who's really going to create at the rim. He's going to create for himself. He can win in isolation. And it brings a whole new element to this team. And we've started to see it lately. Georgia threw several different defenders at him, and there was just nothing they can do. LSU tried to throw several defenders at him. There was nothing they could do. And LSU particularly has 2 guards who are veteran guards who have been there a while, who are solid defenders. He's been able to just beat those guys one-on-one, and that's what's so impressive. And like you said, Jesse, this is a team that doesn't recruit at a really high level, and what usually when you talk about recruiting, you're talking about athleticism. Because when you're looking at raw prospects, that's what you have to go on. You have size, you have athleticism. That's where Vanderbilt falls behind a little bit. Saban Lee is every bit as athletic as the next guy. You see it in every other game with his really highlight dunks over defenders. So it's pretty impressive to see him be able to take this team, drag them to these close games late because, I mean, let's face it, they had 78 points. He had 34 of them. Yeah. I mean, he did most of the heavy lifting with this team. So Lee has totally kind of taken this team from rock bottom and really pulled him up. Another guy who had a strong game, and I know he missed a couple of those free throws late, was Scottie Pippen. He had a couple games in a row where dropped into kind of single-digit scoring. He came out with 20 big points yesterday, this weekend.
I was really encouraged by his growth in that not getting too down about the games where he didn't score as much, but also his ability to create for himself. I think he had a couple shots, there was a couple fadeaway shots, and that in big moments that we really needed. And it's a shame that he did miss those free throws at the end, and that's all that people really want to talk about. But he did have, like you said, he did have a pretty solid game overall, and he created for other players. And because he had such a big game as well, it really opened up the opportunities for Lee because the defense couldn't just cue in on Lee, and they had to be aware of Pippen as well. So I think if he has another big game and then it allows Lee to have another big game, I think maybe we'll see one of these games turn into a win.
Yeah, we'll see both of those guys tonight against Missouri. What does Vanderbilt have to do to kind of replicate at least the first 36 minutes of this weekend's performance and pull off this win at home against Missouri?
I think that, well, when you talk about Scottie Pippen, something I thought he did really well in the last game was defense. I thought he was working really hard on the defensive end of the floor, and I think that's how this team is going to have to win. I just don't know if there's enough offense for us to win shootouts unless we're really, really hitting. And that's been inconsistent. So if you can we've ran into foul trouble in the last game, so I think we're going to have to stay out of foul trouble because we don't have the kind of depth that a team like Kentucky does, or a team like Auburn does, or some of these teams in the Big East that develop a lot of their players. We just don't have that depth. So I think we're going to have to stay out of foul trouble. 3-point shooting, I think, is always going to have to be good. It was decent last game, and I just don't know if we have the type of players that are going to be able to, besides Saban Lee, going to be able to get to the hoop and create their own offense if we're not making shots.
Yeah, and I to your point as well, I think you need to also not solely rely on the 3-point shot. I think you need to build off the idea and the game plan of like attacking the rim as much as you can, and then that opens up 3-point shots.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the key. I think you've got to try to get Evans involved early. We've seen when Evans gets involved in the offense and when he has good days, this offense has good days because it's not just single-minded with Lee. So getting Evans hot early, being able to have him play off Lee has been a key for this team. Hopefully they'll do it tonight against Missouri. We'll now move to the baseball team, the Vandy boys. 7-2 as of right now, probably about to be 8-2 given their performance against St. Louis tonight. I mean, this is a team that's firing on all cylinders now, but mostly pitching. And we've seen it this past week. Heading into yesterday's start for Jack Leiter, this was a team that went 5-0 last week. All 5 pitchers threw gems. Jack Leiter was no exception yesterday. Jessie, you were on hand for this game. What did you see from Leiter that impressed you so much? Obviously only a freshman in his second start, but really a lot to take away here.
So I saw him, a lot of pitchers come out of high school being able to throw hard. So him being able to hit 94, 95 on his fastball with control is really impressive. But what was more impressive to me was his curveball. Not only was he using it to strike out hitters looking as a pitch to finish hitters off, send him back to the dugout, but what was more impressive was his ability to use it as an out pitch. To have that kind of confidence in a second or third pitch along with his changeup and not just have to throw a fastball to feel confident that you're going to put the ball where you want to put it, that makes pitchers really dangerous. And for him to be doing that as a freshman and just his second start in college shows that the future is really bright for him. Obviously, there's a lot of hype around Jack Leiter, whether it be off his dad or just the fact that he's an incredible pitcher. He plays for a state champion high school baseball team that's basically a college factory. Really, really impressive stuff yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at impressive stuff from him and from the entire staff. I mean, as of the week of the 17th, they were 5-0 with a sub-1 ERA and 54 strikeouts. So this is a team in total that knows how to. I mean, you're laughing because they know how to put people away. And I was also impressed with the offense too. I mean, this team has scored. What is it now? They've scored, I think. What am I saying? I'm going to say on the defensive end. Sorry. They've allowed 5 runs in the last 6 over allowing 12 in the first 3 games to start the year. So the defense has improved. The offense is really good. I'm impressed with Carter Young, who's second on the team in hits, and he's leading the team in RBIs, especially as a freshman shortstop. I mean, people want to talk about Leiter, but him has almost been as equally impressive on the offensive side. So I think it's been a well-gelled effort, but pitching has definitely stolen the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy to think that as good as Leiter's been, there's a good shot he doesn't crack the weekend rotation at all this year, just because that's how good those first 3 guys are. And we know about Hickman, we know about Rocker. Eater had a shaky first start, but really came back strong this past week in that win over UIC over the weekend. He's really been incredible for them. So, I mean, all 5 of these guys, Ethan Smith throwing today, have been pitching at the top of at their absolute best right now. And so it's hard to see kind of where these runs are going to come from other teams against Vanderbilt. Offensively, they've started to pick it up lately. And it was a little bit of a concern the first weekend, not really generating runs at the rate that we kind of hoped they would. But now Austin Martin's back hitting. He hit his second home run today. I mean, this is a guy who has a really good shot to be the #1 overall pick this year, and he's really starting to heat up. How dangerous is that for kind of opposing pitchers coming in here, especially teams that aren't really up to par right now, and Vanderbilt looks perfectly ready.
I'm a little worried about the offense right now. J.J. Blade obviously carried a huge load through the season last year. And something I noticed yesterday when I was covering the game is they scored in 5 different innings, which is great. They left a lot of runners on base. And against an Evansville team that was winless coming into the game, they only put up a crooked number on that scoreboard once, and it was on a home run, so it only came on 1 play. They need to start stringing hits together and being able to rally behind their pitching staff. So that scoreboard, you can come out one inning and it went from 1-0 to 6-0 not 1, 2, 3. It takes a lot of stress off the pitching staff, and as good as our pitchers are at Hawkins Field, there are going to be games where they don't have their best stuff. There are going to be games where the defense makes errors, and there are going to be games where hitters just might get lucky and hit one out. But the offense needs to learn, not necessarily learn, but it needs to start stringing hits together and putting up some big innings.
To your point, just kind of right on cue. I mean, today, to start that game, really good first couple innings. Austin Martin obviously hits that 3-run homer. The inning continues, and they end up with 5 runs right there in that inning. That's the kind of offense I think you're talking about, and it's the kind of offense we've become accustomed to, especially last season with this team. I mean, this was a team that fell behind 10-1, or 9-1 rather, against Ole Miss in the SEC championship, and just continued to battle back until eventually they won the game. And that's the kind of offense we've, I guess, become accustomed to. It will take a little bit longer this year, but I think you're absolutely right. This is a team that's left a lot of runners on base early. It's a team that honestly left a lot of runners on base last year. They were just such good hitters that they'd get so many guys on base that it didn't really matter. But this is a team that has left a lot of runners on base early, and I think part of that is Corbin kind of tinkering with his lineup, seeing where he wants some of these guys so that he can get his hitters like Austin Martin up with the most guys on base as possible. Same with Ty Duvall. Dominic Keegan coming back into the lineup today. So I do think Corbin's still kind of juggling with things a little bit right now.
I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? I mean, to be able to have so many dynamic hitters that you can put any sort of spot in the lineup. Like, I mean, we've seen Austin Martin play leadoff. We've seen him, at batting third. I mean, and he's got, I think it's all just getting opportunities for him to get on base, because I think a guy like that, you can move anywhere. Also, it's to be able to, and he'll figure it out. I think Corbin obviously knows the game of baseball well enough that he'll be able to, figure out, why am I even saying that? That he'll be able to figure out the perfect way for this lineup to look. And I think in these early season games where you're not necessarily facing the toughest pitching or, SEC foes, I think it's great to tinker with the lineup and then see what works best.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of times we're sometimes critical of basketball, we're sometimes critical of football. I think the general consensus around Vanderbilt is if Tim Corbin's doing it, it's probably right, and until it proves to be wrong. It's just that's how good this program's been over the past decade or so. If he's throwing this guy today, that's probably the guy he should be throwing today. If this guy's hitting second today and third tomorrow, that's probably where he should be hitting. He's just been right on so many of those things lately, and sometimes he'll get it wrong, and this team will lose some games. This team isn't last year's team, and it shouldn't be. I mean, last year's team was one of a kind. That's the best team that's come through this school probably ever. It's one of the best SEC teams ever. It's one of the best teams that college baseball has seen. I mean, they won 59 games last season. You're not going to see that very often. But this team is unique in its own way. It's unique in how it has so many starting pitchers that are really able to shine, and we'll start to see that more this coming weekend. They'll face Hawaii, and we'll really start to see it when they get into SEC play. We're going to turn now to the big news of the day. A shakeup in the athletics office again. Vanderbilt releasing its strategic plan. Those are kind of the buzzwords we've heard over the course of the last year, really ever since Malcolm Turner took over. And strategic plan was released today. 17-page plan. I think and I might not speak alone here, it probably could have been 1 or 2. And the big takeaway is that there will be renovations to the Commodore football locker room, but that's really about it in terms of tangible things that this plan set out to do. It kind of, Candace Story Lee expressed it as a roadmap for the future. Are you a little disappointed kind of in what you saw from this plan, or was this kind of what you expected and next steps will come?
I mean, a little, I think, would be an understatement. I was expecting more tangible things than, yes, I think the locker room is a great positive if it leads to players spending more time in the locker room and obviously contributing to more film study, hang out with each other, and then that could contribute maybe to a better product on the field. But I think this was a lot of almost vanilla language that was turned, I don't hate to say using a thesaurus, almost make it sound better in a way. Because a lot of things they touched on were careers for athletes, talking about careers for athletes post-time in college, financial performance, personal and academic development, athletic excellence, fan experience. I think these are all things that athletic departments in college worry about and they want to get better at. So I almost saw it as not really saying much, and it's disappointing. I don't even think they mentioned the word football in it at all, did they? I don't think so. I mean, it's disappointing.
I think there's been a lot of turnover in the athletic office, and strategic plans are supposed to be built by the office. So when you have 3 different people in the athletic director's chair in a couple of years, that's going to be problematic in building consensus on exactly what needs to happen. It sounds like there's some fundraising issues. Sounds like there's some infighting on what we do with that fundraising.
Yep.
And I think the issues here go much further than just some generalized language. The university is not raising enough money, clearly, because, and out of the money it is raising, there seems to be uncertainty of how much of that should go towards the athletic program. But if you look around the Power 5 conferences of Division I, every single school is putting money into their athletic facilities and their training centers and their stadiums and their game day experiences. And so far, Vanderbilt has not really. You go around, look at small private schools around the country. Northwestern is building a beautiful football facility.
That
Right
is
on the
the
wall.
practice facilities. It's beautiful. It really
Wake
is.
Forest has recently built a new training facility. These are schools that are very comparable to Vanderbilt. There are small private schools outside cities that are able to succeed athletically. And are they a top 10 team every single year? No. But Northwestern won the Big Ten West last year. Wake Forest won 8 games this year. And we know how this past season went. It's stuff that has to get changed, and there needs to be more agreement in the administration building on if they're going to say that they're going to take this seriously, they need the money and the action to back it up.
Yep, and we saw, one thing I noticed this week is at the Combine, Kalijah Lipscomb, Keyshawn Vaughn, Jared Pinkney, they're asked about this and almost collectively said, yeah, I loved it at Vanderbilt, but they need to pour more money into athletics if they want the facilities to be able to compete at an SEC level. It's not a secret, and when your players are saying, and particularly your best players coming out of school are saying these upgrades need to be made, there's really no more proof than that. I think one thing that's tough for Lee, and I think Lee's been put in a tough position here, is she's succeeding a man who overspent by all reports. I mean, whatever money he was given, he apparently overspent or spent it too quickly and was eventually, his accounts were frozen. I mean, they weren't spending any more money at a certain point. So, I mean, it's tough to expect that the plan that comes out to then include all these sweeping changes because we already know the money's not there for him. Whether or not that money exists, it just isn't being put into athletics, that I don't know. But we know that there's not enough money to do it. So it's tough to expect Lee to kind of make something out of nothing there. I do think that this was marketed as a plan that would enact tangible change, and I think what we saw and what was pivoted to was more of a roadmap for what's going to happen in the future. This is the first step. Now we'll look at what actions we can take, and I think the Commodore Nation was a little bit misled in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see where this goes. I want to see if, the things that they say that they're going to do are going to happen, and I believe it's also important, as much as I'm sort of saying that it's almost more vanilla talk, I think it's important to give it a chance and to see how they execute the plan that they have, because it could surpass all expectations, and it could turn out to be really good. We don't know yet.
The last thing I want to say is just, they say he overspent, but if we're going based off what overspending has meant at this university, then not much is going to get done without overspending. And clearly we're not spending as much as other schools around the country. So if we're going to keep going off of the previous standards of what this school can do in terms of spending, then I don't know how many athletic directors are going to be able to make these changes without overspending. And if that's going to be the barrier, then don't know how much is going to change.
Yep, absolutely a fair point. I think some of that will never be fleshed out in terms of what the issues with Turner really were, whether or not he was really overspending by how much, whether the issue was on the athletic side or the administration side. some of that stuff we'll never know. But like you said, Bobby, I mean, the only hope is that this can take the next step forward and the action plan can be next and it can be satisfactory. And I think that's what Vanderbilt fans are hoping for at this point, because I think patience is certainly running thin for 2 of the 3 programs here, and hopefully change comes soon. That'll be all the time we have today for VU Sports Wired. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week to break down the final games of basketball's regular season and to break down baseball's series against Hawaii and preview SEC play for them. That'll all be next week. Thank you so much for listening. This has been VU Sports Wired.